Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
We are live again
Live again.
for the second time. Do you want to switch because these are mine?
No, I already switched.
You already switched them? It's very sneaky.
Very sneaky.
This is very sneaky.
We need some food.
We do need some food. Do these wines need food? I don't know. I think they work. I think they work on their own. Hello for anyone who is here, who was here and is no longer here, might have been waiting for us. Apologies. But we are here now, better late than never, and are tasting some Cabernet Sauvignon from this month's Somme Demand Trio, right from our own backyard in Napa Valley. So if you've ever been curious about Napa Valley, or you've been waiting for us to just do a big Cab Trio, they're not even that big. They're just great.
Well, the trio is big.
The trio is big.
The trio
the wines, they're perfect.
Yeah, the wines are balanced.
Yeah, we just tasted a few.
Yeah, I'd say these are Somme Demand style for sure. And when I say that, I mean, you're like, these aren't that big. No, because we don't like things that are a little too rich or overdone. But these, I think, as we just tasted, all have a certain amount of freshness to them that keep them from being overly unctuous or sweet, or maybe that Cabernet that has fallen a little out of style. But Cabernet itself should be a full-bodied wine, and these certainly are.
I think these are. These definitely are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can't tell who's watching or who's not.
Currently, nobody is watching.
So we know that for a fact.
We know that for a fact. I see 0 next to the eyeball icon.
Okay.
So we're all by ourselves. But you know what? We got 50 minutes. We got 50 minutes. We said between 7 and 8.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I don't know. If no one comes, we'll pull the plug. But, let's give some value. We're going to record this. We're going to put it on our website.
Oh, yeah?
We're going to put it on our YouTube channel. We're going to put it on our... We're going to put it on YouTube. It'll be right next to that super polished one that we just recorded for you. So if you do get this trio, there'll be a little tasting where David and I take you through. I know I keep calling him David because I feel serious here. Roby and I take you through.
I mean, look at where we are. We're in the sun.
This is a serious place.
Look at these guys looking at you behind, watching over your shoulder, wondering what you're tasting.
Do you know Ronaldo, guys? That's a serious wine.
That's a serious wine.
A serious wine.
We're two unserious of people.
Unserious people drinking serious wine. That's the name of our podcast.
Unserious people drinking serious wine. Good word.
Serious wine.
We'll just have
drunk by unserious people.
Drunk by drunk people.
No, we're not drunk. We're serious.
No, eventually. I mean, for the podcast title, it'd be a good one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll workshop that. Your input is encouraged.
Yeah, yours.
Yeah. But let's start thinking about Napa. And
yeah, I feel like you had a bunch of questions that popped up during the tasting that you felt like you couldn't answer.
Oh man, I wanted to just shout out loud constantly about things that came into my head. So I'm glad that we can actually cover some stuff that wasn't in the script.
Yeah.
So my first thought, and I do mention this in the tasting, is that I'm not a huge Cab drinker. I am not a Napa person. When I do drink Cab, I tend to do Bordeaux. I think it's like a more like kind of not lighter is not the word, but just a more austere style. I think that Napa Cabs can be really rich and really just like almost exhausting on the palate. Like they're great. They're flavor bombs, and then they kind of wear me out.
Yeah. And
not to mention they can get you get really drunk sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was excited to try the Somme Demand lineup because I think after tasting them, they are 3 cabs that are totally my style. And I never would have thought that. And that's like, I think what you're bringing to my wine drinking experience that I would not find on my own. Well, I would. Yeah, that's something that excites me about Cab now.
I'm glad you appreciate that. And I think going back to your comment about, Bordeaux, they are typically lighter wines. So when we talk about the weight of a wine, right, we're talking about, the alcohol contributes to that, the climate, the ripeness of fruit. And the other thing that you notice with Bordeaux, and something we didn't talk about in the tasting because it's too big a can of words to open, is Cabernet and Merlot and Cab Franc, they all have this compound called pyrazines.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people seek this kind of people associate with green bell pepper or the savory green flavor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which can be compelling, but can be equally off-putting to those who realize that is a lack of ripeness.
Is that not something that's like kind of classically viewed as a flaw in wine?
I wouldn't say it's classically viewed as a flaw, especially when you talk about Bordeaux.
It's I feel like there are a lot of things that are classically flaws that people love.
Yeah, well, there are, and for instance, I find volatile acidity to be a nice aspect or an enhancement to a wine. But then again, I drink a lot of Italian wine, therefore my tolerance of volatile acidity is maybe higher than someone who's never experienced volatile acidity. For those,
can you stop for a second and give me the breakdown of volatile acidity?
Volatile acidity. I mean, theoretically, there's many different. Well, scientifically, there's many different compounds, but that create the smell of VA. But if you've ever smelled nail polish remover or this kind of note of acetone, really, doesn't sound very pleasing.
No.
But what volatile acidity does in a wine is it really does lift the aromas out of the glass. And so if you have a really nice fruity wine and there's just a kiss of VA on it, it just permeates those fruit tones up to your nose. It permeates that florality to your nose. It creates a lift to it. It's still, it's volatile acidity. It enhances the acidity of the wine. So
right,
there's always too much, right? If we talk about any flaw, there's Brettanomyces, which can accentuate savory flavors in a wine, but can also be too much.
Which I did write about Brettanomyces briefly in one of our blog posts, our very first one, I believe.
Yeah, and I know you're not.
Maybe I'm just a picky. I'm just a, maybe I'm boring. I don't know. I'm a boring purist, I guess.
This is what's wrong with the wine community.
I'm everything that's wrong with wine.
Snobs, man.
Something about something about Brettanomyces. It's like salt, too much, and you've gone overboard, and it's irrecoverable.
That's with everything.
But yeah.
That's with everything. That's the same
by like
thing.
A little bit. I think it adds a savory component.
Right. And the same thing goes for pyrazines. Mm-hmm. This, classic flaw is actually something that is sought after in a lot of Bordeaux, especially if you talk about Chateau Haut-Brion, which is a very famous forest growth that focuses on Cab Franc, right? You're going to get even more pyrazines in Cab Franc.
Cab Franc is a much more pyrazine varietal.
Right, than Cabernet Sauvignon, right? And so, that it's I wouldn't say you smell. I digress. But so pyrazines, they're not a flaw because they're part of the grape. But when you're in Napa Valley, and if you talk about the 2011 vintage, which was super rainy and super cold, the problem with the wines was they never reached full maturity in Napa. Not all of them, but a lot of them didn't reach full maturity and couldn't get ripe enough. And you just had this really strong note of pyrazine on a lot of the wines. On the other hand, there were a lot of wineries, and that's why you always buy winemaker, or I always buy producer over vintage, because 2011 still has fantastic wines from Napa Valley because it was a colder year and people did make great wines that were not quite as high in alcohol, did have notes of these subtle, pyrazine and these subtle Bordeaux notes that is what makes it so famous, and they come out tasty. Right. So yes, Bordeaux is lighter. To summarize your question, Bordeaux is lighter, and it's got more acidity typically as well. And so if you
love acidity,
and you love acidity,
we love acidity.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I talk down about Napa. But it's not my first wine that I grab, out of my cellar. And I think sometimes
because it's not in your cellar.
It isn't in my cellar. But what, we wanted to do Cabernet because one, people love it. And two, I think sometimes we feature European wines just a little too much that we should.
We got to appreciate what's in our backyard.
Yeah.
And this is. I mean, so getting back to the wines, this Branham, this is awesome. I really, it's got more heft to it than like your Sandra, your kind of same price point Chianti Classico or something. But it's pure. It's delicious.
Fresh.
It's fresh. Yeah. And I think that is what I'm looking for in a wine.
Yeah. The thing about Branham is, and we talked about it a little in the actual tasting, but there's with the no new oak, and just those kind of red, pure Cabernet fruit, it's hard not to like this.
It's approachable.
It's hard not to like this.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pour this for a lot of people and they're going to be okay with it.
Right. Crowd pleaser. So if you're thinking, I need a crowd pleasing Cabernet, I think this is going to hit it. This isn't going to offend your people who are like Pinot only. And I also think that it's going to be enough for those people who are like all in on concentration and Cabernet.
Well, let me tell you about
wines.
Some people who are only drink Cabernet. As long as the bottle says Cabernet.
As long as the bottle says Cabernet.
They're going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, it's that distinctive of a grape, right?
It is that distinctive of a grape.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of when you think of Cabernet?
I think of bold extracted wines, like bold concentrated.
What's extracted for
I think of wines that, well, I mean, my understanding of extraction is when it sits on the skins. You can press grapes, you're getting the juice out of them, and you can either pull that juice off right away, which is what happens with a lot of the lighter reds, or you can let that sit and macerate with the like plant matter, right? With either the skins and seeds and their stems or any combination of those.
Right.
And so when I think of like big extracted wines, I think, these are sitting with that plant matter for a long time, and the juice is just like pulling all of that matter into it and like building literally a thicker juice. Right?
I was envisioning.
It's a jus.
It's a jus.
It's a jus.
Yeah.
And then they pull that off, and then that's why you end up with, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to end up with like jus. Right?
and you're talking about the extraction of winemaking, which is obviously very, you nailed it, and that's really important. But extraction is also just, from the vineyard on, right? It's leaving the grapes on the vines to extract as much fruit and flavor and alcohol
on the vines as well, of course.
Everything. It's
there's no one phase of extraction.
Like maximum extraction is like in every phase of winemaking, you're trying to extract as much flavor as you can, and oftentimes that ends up with extracting a massive amount of alcohol, amassing a massive amount of thickness or concentration.
I hadn't even thought of that as like an element of extraction, but
yeah,
that makes sense.
No, because that is you had the most important one, right? But that starts with it can sit on.
It starts in the vineyard.
It starts in the vineyard because if you allow Cabernet to sit on the vine longer, like every day, after it's reached a certain ripeness, every day your sugars are raising, your acid is dropping, and you're constantly making this. So like a more extracted wine that can handle more new oak and more time sitting on its skins would be one that would, so as it goes, gets riper and riper and riper, the skins are getting
raisinating, right? I mean, eventually it's
more about the ratio of the ripeness of the sugars, right? The ratio of sugar and juice to the skin. So that keeps increasing. So your juice can then overwhelm the skin. You can take on more tannins from the skin. You can take on more tannins from the oak because you have something that is bigger, richer, and therefore
needs more balance. It needs
more balance.
It needs to pull stuff from other sources because you have taken that grape so far that on its own it's no longer balanced.
Right. And there are some masters of extraction there's some fantastic wines that maybe are a little atypical of the style that I've introduced you to or that I like, and unfortunately I can't afford many of them. Or
fortunately.
or fortunately, but there are some special wines out there that it's like nothing you ever had. That thickness, that richness. Thick sounds bad. It's more like just the concentration, smoothness, and decadence of the wine, like reaches it. But it's really hard to do. A lot of times they fall short of this pinnacle that they're going for, and it ends up just being like sweet and blah, no acid.
Well,
you
mentioned something earlier about how year to year weather changes and like kind of handling the grape in each year. Like what makes a great winemaker is the adaptability, is the consistency, right? It's being able to take whatever nature kind of gives you and make something great out of it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is kind of what we're tasting here, right? Like it is people who have taken these grapes, which have a tendency, like you forget about them on the vine, and then you've got raisins, and your product is ruined, and you've spent a lot of money on your land in Napa. So it takes a lot to really make sure that you're protecting that investment and like giving the best thing you can.
Right.
And I think that that's what we've got here. I really do. I think that these are
tasty wines.
These are tasty wines. And would you say that these are producers that year in, year out are giving you that consistent product?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like what's really important about Somm Demand is that we're not just picking wines that taste good on a given year. You know, like if you come get Brandon from us next year and it's going to be good. Yeah. It's going to taste like this.
Yeah.
You come get, Récoltant next year.
It's going to
be good. It might be a little bit different, but you've got people that we trust to make great wines year in and year out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then if you happen to not see a wine on the next vintage, there might be a reason.
There might be a reason for it. Yeah. Okay, so talk to me about Turnbull. Or sorry, not Turnbull. Talking about Récoltant.
Récoltant. I think that this, from what I've poured for the most amount, and maybe because it is in the middle, but people love this wine.
Crowd pleaser.
You said the resolution was a crowd pleaser for those that maybe don't like Cabernet, right? So it's your crowd pleaser in the span of hitting a lot of people, but your Cabernet drinkers are more gonna like the Récoltant because it is a little more of that classic. It's got that new French oak note on it. It's got that spiciness to it, right? It's got some structure to it. You pointed that actually out in the tasting. You're like, well, I feel it's drier. But I think you were just talking about the tannin per se, right? Because I don't know the actual residual sugar amounts for these, but they're all probably about the same dryness.
So because in this format, we get to kind of, digress as much as we want, diverge as much as we want.
Please.
Can you tell me, like,
diverge away.
New oak, right? We know, like, obviously wine can be aged in oak barrels.
Yeah.
What do we mean when we say new oak?
New oak.
What is new oak?
New oak. Great question. Let me get a little water. New oak is the brand new oak barrel that wine goes into. So we can go backwards, right? So grapes, they're on the vines. You pick them, and then you ferment them, and then you can macerate them, aka leave them on the skins for a certain amount of time. You can ferment them in oak. You can ferment them in stainless steel. But when we talk about new oak barrels, we're talking about wines being racked or rested or aged in new wood. And new wood, I mean, if you've ever gone to a lumber yard, you can smell like a sawmill, right? You can, those notes, the if you ever got a splinter, right? Like there's texture to new wood as well. And there's actually tannins in wood, right? And those tannins that are in wood, go into the wine. So when you have a tannic wine, oftentimes it is a lot of oak tannin, but obviously there's grape tannins, there's tannins in the skins, there's tannins in the seeds, right? Then you add that with new oak and you have a formula for even more tannin. And so new oak is something, one winemaker told me there's no such thing as too much oak, there's such a thing as not enough fruit, right? So new oak is expensive, new oak adds tannin, new oak adds flavor, right?
There's no such thing as too much salt, only not enough food.
Yeah, and you know what, oak, that's a really good thing, because we do talk about oak as more of a seasoning, right? You don't want the flavor of your wine to be oak. You want the oak to enhance the fruit, which is why Cabernet is so commonly associated with
a lot of food. It can handle a lot of salt.
It's a lot of food. It can handle a lot of salt. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's so dense. It's got so much fruit. Sometimes, unless you're Branham, in a lot of cases, you really need that oak to bring some structure or to bring a little bit more kind of layered nuance to an otherwise kind of more fruit-driven wine, right? Oh, you like that one, huh?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, we like to say at tastings too, like sometimes, we'll have a dinner, we'll have a bunch of bottles out, we'll taste way more wines than we think we can drink. And, at the end of the night, someone will say, oh, that was my, I think I like that one the most. And then we'll point to the bottle like, oh yeah, why is it half full? Because everyone's, kind of everyone's favorite wine or the consensus winner is usually gone right? Because that's the one that you drink the most of. And so
put your liver where your mouth is.
Put your liver where your mouth is. Yeah.
I do. I think this is really, if you're not a cab person, I think that these might change your perspective on cab.
Yeah.
Because they did for me. And as someone who really loves lifted wines, I drink a lot of Beaujolais, a lot of Pinot Noir, Gamay, Sangiovese. Even like some of the biggest wines I drink are Nebbiolos, which are still very, very different from a Cabernet. And these are doing it for me. Absolutely.
It's all about acidity, man. I mean, it's all about balance.
Yeah, I think I have been skeptical in the past about being able to find balance in Napa, and I think
I'm not gonna say it's easy.
It's not, well, that's what we're here for, right? Is you might not find those balanced wines on your own, and this is what having a somm on your team is like. That there they are, 3 balanced cabs from Napa with acid, where every day is a fruit day. What more could you want, right? Like it's great.
It is. And the other thing is too, I mean, and unfortunate, when I'm tasting a lot of wines, it's kind of weird, that people try to sell us a lot of wines in some ways. We sit down and we taste through the portfolio, and even you were involved with a tasting earlier today where we were tasting a bunch of German wines, and you're like, this one's really good, and we're comparing it to the first one, and I was like, well, it's also X amount percentage more than the first one, right? Which is something we always have to take in consideration. It's like, unfortunately, in California, wine is really expensive, and it's hard to find. There's plenty of great Cabernets, and there's plenty of, deliciously balanced Cabernets. They're just,
but finding them at your price point,
they tend to be like anywhere else.
Yeah. So would you say that, like, what I think of the, I don't know, I can't remember, we touched on this in the tasting. I can't remember if we touched on this here, but the idea that one thing that's always held me back from buying Cabernet is that I think of these, like, there is the Screaming Eagles of the world that I know I'll probably just never taste, right? And then there's this insane price point of Cabernet, and then there's like the kind of garden variety grocery store Cabernet, and it's so nondescript. I have no idea where those grapes are coming from. I don't know anything about the wines, and there's so many of them. Like the sub $20, sub $15 cab is kind of a wild card, right? And I think that it's really cool to see 3 wines kind of in between those, finding the middle ground, and giving us wines that are both balanced, delightful, and like affordable.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much we're allowed to diverge.
As much as we want. We're live, and no one's watching.
You really sparked something there, and how do I put this? Okay. All right, so we all know that
You're entering the mind of David Roby.
So we all know that we've except he's actually trying to formulate his thoughts and articulate it. So we all know that we've been experiencing crazy amount of inflation, right? Over the last few years. And a lot of people, if you go on our website, you're not going to find any wines that are $20 or less. And that's not because we want to charge more than we have to. But there's a real cost to everything that's made, and there's a real cost to growing it. Then when we break it down, we're talking about
doing it the right way.
Yeah, but we're talking about an agricultural product at the end of the day, right? Which requires water, which requires land, which requires labor. And I mean, if you didn't know, in 2021 there was a major glass shortage. Some regions didn't bottle wines because the glass was too expensive for them to get it.
I think that sprung a big wine bottle recycling program in California.
Yeah,
I think you can get, I think it's 25 cents a bottle, maybe.
Oh, really?
It's like they incentivize you now to recycle, like keep your wine bottles, not just like chuck them into recycling, but literally like bring them back, not to the winery, but to a hub where they will redistribute.
Why didn't you tell me about bottles. That? Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah. We're gonna make money. We're gonna make money.
So
just
the Kramer Newton bottle. But but I mean, let's just talk. So there's Newman. An economy. Did I say Newton?
You said Newton.
Newton. I was thinking Cabernet. Newton Cabernet.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So we're talking about economy. We're talking about an agricultural product. A lot of, as we know,
hello, Newman.
Our food. How do we put this? culture in America is not necessarily transparent, right? When you go to, Europe, like organic is a little more normal, not adding stuff to your food, all these preservatives, all these things like that. Same thing, I wouldn't say goes for wine, but it does. There's a lot that goes into your wines, man. There's a lot of, there are some major companies out here that sell, specific yeast, that sell specific additives to make their wines of certain color. So the yeast can actually impart flavor upon the wine, which is why in the natural wine community and a lot of the wines that I like are native yeast fermented, right? It's an ambient
native yeast meaning
like ambient yeast, like the
literally
yeast that's
whatever is on the walls and in the air,
yeah,
like
the real
in the room,
the real sourdough, right? The sourdough real starter, right? That real yeast,
not from a packet.
Right. And
like,
I'm not saying that we don't sell wines that aren't inoculated, aka used a commercial yeast, but that's one of the ways that you can impart a specific flavor. And so when you end up buying a bottle of wine for $10 or $15 in your grocery store,
shortcuts were taken.
I'm sure that sugar was added to 90% of them, which is called chaptalization. That sugar does not need to be grape juice. That sugar could be beet juice. That sugar could be corn syrup. That sugar could be any which way that they can get more sugar into grapes that weren't ripe enough.
Oftentimes it's the most cost-effective form of sugar they can get.
So that's one way that you add it. Then if you don't have the right balance and the right acidity, you can actually acidify your wines. Right. And it's not expensive.
Tartaric acid, I know people sprinkle into their wines.
It's not expensive.
Yeah.
It's a very cheap way to get balance, right? And I'm not going to say that the wines don't necessarily taste passable.
I mean, people are doing it to make their wines taste better. Like, the only reason you do it is when you taste it, you think this isn't good enough, so you add something to it, right? But then it becomes distorted from what it could have been made from the natural grapes.
Well, and I also think that the same way that you're adding something to your food, the same way that when you're eating preserved foods or when you have frozen food or when things are adulterated, there's nothing like taking that tomato off a vine that's like still warm from the sun and just putting it in your mouth, right? That explosion of natural flavor is like really hard to beat, right? And as a wine lover, what I find is that as I sit here drinking Napa Cabernet, I find that that's what I'm seeking is like this explosion of flavor that I wouldn't say
makes me feel good.
I wouldn't say I can taste when something's been adulterated, but a lot of times wines that have been adulterated just don't have quite the backbone, quite the pop, quite the the unique feeling that you get. And that's really what you're after when you're a wine drinker. Same thing as an Epicurean. You're really after that unique food experience or something that really kind of sets you off. And so, it's unfortunate, but it's pretty much impossible to make an organically farmed California wine with a native yeast fermentation. Not saying that these are organically farmed native yeast fermentation. What I'm, the pinnacle of wine or the goal or my favorite wines or the ones I want to support are, not so harmful to the environment and are grown in the right way and then are fermented
transparent,
full flavor.
Right? They're transparent.
Yeah.
You could go there, you can meet them, you can engage with them, you can see what they're doing, right? They're I think the biggest difference here is that you could go to places and you can see what they're doing and you can see the plants and you can and anyone who takes a tour in Napa Valley, like you're seeing that, right? But when you take a tour in Napa Valley, how much do they try to sell you wine for at the end, right? I mean, it's expensive. And so I think this gives you the essence of that farming and viticulture and gives it to you at a price point that you can actually afford, that puts you kind of that step above the nondescript grocery store wine that you don't know what's in it. You don't know what they've added to it to get it to taste that way. I mean, I know that when a wine is in every grocery store all over America, like every Safeway across America, how do you think they're doing that, right? Like, how are you getting one wine to taste the same in every grocery store in America?
Well, it doesn't.
Who's growing that much? Who's doing that, right?
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense when you think about it. And so, not to say that these are like tiny scale.
No, this is 500 cases.
Yeah.
Which it's not small scale, but that's this is a small family winery. Récolton, I know, is not necessarily a large production, and I'm not allowed to say the wineries in which the fruit comes from. But if you were to buy those wineries, you're looking at something that is, no joke, at least 3 to 4 times the price. But some people know some people, and they buy some barrels, and it doesn't make the first cut for their blend, and they get some really, really high quality juice in new French oak barrels. That's a great value. And you can find it, but it's not super wide scale production, and you won't find it in Safeway. Turnbull is all estate fruit, so everything that's in this bottle, Turnbull.
They're not bringing it from outside Napa. They're not even buying it from their next door neighbor. This is their fruit.
Yeah,
they're cultivating these grapes. They're doing, that's like, I think an underappreciated element in wine is that when you buy a bottle, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, like, if that doesn't matter, like, that's great. Like, get the experience you want out of wine, right?
Yeah.
And we're not trying to force that on anybody. But if you're curious, or if you're looking to kind of, what's it all about? What is the difference? Where do these changes happen? You don't have to get the trio. Buy one of these wines. They're on our website.
Mm-hmm.
Get your grocery store like Cabernet, and just try them side by side. I wrote a blog post on side by siding like Pinot Noirs, and just being able to tell one grape from another, and starting with Pinot. But you can do the same process with a single varietal, within a varietal, and see. We're doing that right now. We're trying 3 cabs side by side.
That's the true
it's a really fun thing to do. I mean, we're noticing differences that if I just went and picked this off a shelf, and then a week later came and picked the Récolton off a shelf, and then came a week later and picked the Turnbull off a shelf, the differences wouldn't be as stark. They wouldn't be as acute. And I might appreciate the differences in any moment and say, oh, I really like the freshness and fruitiness and the lack of oak in this one, the levity. This one I love the oak, or this one I love the concentration and the chocolatey. I could appreciate all those elements, but when you try them side by side, it's fun. Yeah. It's like a game, you're going back and forth. You'll see me kind of trying one and going back to the other. It was one of the notes that you mentioned in the first tasting with the Barovia. It was like, try the Dolcetto, but then go do the Barbera, and then come back to the Dolcetto. And now you'll really notice what Dolcetto is like.
Yeah. Or the qualities these wines have.
Yeah.
Well, I like that. That you encourage people to, like, go buy the thing that you buy and then taste it next to something else.
Yeah. And if you still can't tell the difference and you want to, like, Roby's here. Like, you can go to our website, you can book time with him, and you could literally bring that bottle to a tasting and just hang out with him on Zoom for 15 minutes. And he'll take you through it. He will. He'll take you through it. Just go. Like, there's a link on our website. It's like on the homepage. You can get time with this cool guy right here. We actually have somebody watching right now. We have a viewer.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, one whole viewer. I don't know if that's a person we know, or if that's somebody that is brand new. But if you feel like saying hi, go ahead in the chat. We can respond. You feel free to ask any questions you might have. Are you drinking anything tonight? Are you? Do you have a bottle open with you right now that you want to talk about? And if you don't want to, that's totally fine. We will keep rambling like 2 dudes with a bottle of wine,
or 3 bottles of wine,
So
it's funny because we were talking. What ends up happening is we end up at your house with a bottle of wine, rambling about what we're talking about, and you're like, this would be great for people to learn about. Like, I didn't know that, because you're always like, oh, you're the reason Sound Demand started, in a way, right?
This is the candid, learning process. I mean, this is how I got into it. I got to sit around tasting with this guy and learned enough to be dangerous. And then we built a website, and he coached me through all of it in a way that I never felt self-conscious. I never felt, and I always felt like I was getting the right wines to keep moving forward. That to me is like what gives me confidence in this business, is that I enjoyed.
What are the right wines? What do you mean right wines?
The right wines for me. There's no like right wine. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that you know me. And as you saw me tasting wine and enjoying or not enjoying certain wines that you recommended, you knew where to take me next. And you knew how to like fill in this web of context and experience that helped me appreciate or branch out on my own and learn the next thing or move to the next region and be able to compare and remember. And I think that's the hardest part about learning wine. That's it right there, is like not being able to tie any given experience back to what you have already experienced. And when you have just somebody an expert helping you out casually it doesn't feel scary or weird.
It's like you setting up notifications on my phone.
Exactly.
It's not scary.
It's not
or weird
scary when you have
when
a
I have
tech
someone
genius
guiding me through
yeah,
it.
holding your hand and setting up your phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of stuff that feels scary at first, and then you just get someone who knows what they're doing, and you feel a lot better about it. So I think wine is one of those things that can be kind of inaccessible. It's probably not surprising to anybody, but we are trying to make it accessible, and I think I know firsthand that can be done.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about how long ago we started drinking together.
Yeah,
I mean, or like not just drinking together. I mean, obviously we drank as like, you know, many years ago before I even, you know,
before wine was even invented.
Before I thought about how much, you know, what went into wine, but you know, here we are, you know what, I don't know, 7 years down the line from like when you got the wine bug.
Yeah.
From when I was like first getting, you know, my first
getting
jobs,
seasoned.
My first jobs in wine and things like that. Man, and now your cellar's looking pretty good too, huh?
Yeah, well, thanks to you, buddy. And Sarah's parents.
You gotta be able to store your wine.
You gotta store it somewhere.
You gotta store it somewhere.
You got family in the basement. You're a lucky person.
Yeah.
So thank you to Abby and Wes.
Thanks, Abby and Wes.
Shout out.
Is there more room? I want to know.
Yeah. No, there's no more room.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the Turnbull.
Turnbull.
This is our third wine in the lineup, and if you've attended one of these before, generally we move towards the priciest wine. Or not always the priciest wine, but the kind of.
Do you not know the structure of our tastings?
What? We move to the biggest wine, the one that makes it's a progression.
The progression of the lightest to richest.
But I mean, if you've tasted our wines, if you've done these trios, it is quite frequent that the third wine is your
more expensive
spender.
Yeah.
And I don't mean big spender. How much is this bottle on our website?
53.
That's a Napa Cab, and you
can
look around. I don't think you'll find this cab for $53.
No, not many places. If you find it,
let us know.
It's a published price online, and they're going to charge you like $60 to ship it to your house or something.
Yeah. The aggregators will tell you something, and then you'll pay something altogether very different.
Exactly.
It's like those hidden fees, the Airbnb fees.
Yeah. No, but Turnbull's, exactly. It's like Turnbull.
What?
Tell you about it. So, Turnbull is, I think, we talked a little bit earlier about, what new oak costs, why wines are so expensive, why they're not. And, this is state grown fruit, which I can't get over enough. It's all from, Turnbull properties in 4 different vineyards, and it's all 100% new French oak. And so what you get here is Cabernet with, that can stand up to the oak, right? So if you were to put, you asked earlier about like what is new oak. So new oak adds tannin. If you taste the Turnbull, give it a little sip. Like, do you feel the tannins?
I mean, it smacks like it's lip smacking. It's like
acidity.
You mentioned like
it's smooth.
When you talked about I think the smoothness. When you talked about like the chocolate notes.
Yeah.
Earlier, I didn't realize that chocolate wasn't just a flavor. It's like you're getting like the texture of chocolatey. It is a richer, more textural wine.
Yeah, and with this, so when you hit something with 100% new oak, you expect those tannins to kind of rip your face off almost. You expect it to be too much, right? But this is actually super integrated.
It's soft.
Soft.
Integrated, I think, is a really good word. I think that's a really good word for it because it feels like there's more of everything in this wine.
Yep, that's a good point.
More of everything.
There's like more fruit. There's probably more
but nothing sticks out as like overwhelming or overpowering the other things. So I think here we had maybe more fruit. Here we had more like in the middle with
tension.
Yeah.
I had the most amount. I think Racolton has the most amount of tension.
Talk to me about tension.
Acidity, tannin, pushback, kind of push-pull on your palate, right? Right. Okay. Turnbull doesn't have tension. It's smooth. It's integrated. It's more velvety. Of that is velvety. If you talk about like, I don't know. This style can easily go too far, right? And become that like, that overly sweet, overly unctuous, lacking acidity, right? You need that smackingness to balance this. Because this is not for the faint of heart. This is a full wine. This is a big dog.
Big dog. Yeah, but it's, you know, I've certainly had some of these, like if I go tasting in Napa, I know the cab at the end is going to be way too much for me. It just is. Like, I feel like I go out and I taste their big dog, their flagship, you know, top bottle, and first maybe I'm like kind of a little, like, I don't know, it's just skeptical or something. I just know that this wine at the end is going to be like the $200 a bottle of wine.
Well, probably is. Especially if you're tasting.
And I know it's going to be this like insanely extracted, concentrated.
So if you were to go to Turnbull,
oak bomb.
So right? let's also just point out, if you were to go to Turnbull, this would not be the last.
Right. This is not the last bottle in the lineup.
This is my favorite of their wines.
This is their flagship.
This is their entry level
wine.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is not cheap. But if you go to Turnbull and you taste, you might get to a point where that wine is like, and
here's my favorite block of vines that we make a single bottling out of 10 cases every, or something like that. Only goes to club members, whatever.
Exactly. And that's where you start getting to the point of like, is it even worth it?
Is it worth it? Right.
And more often than not, it's not, because
I think the question everybody asks is that crazy expensive bottle of wine. What's the difference between that and like the expensive but not crazy expensive bottle of wine, or even like what's the difference between a $50 and a $200 bottle of wine? And I think when you have the cash and the enthusiasm to try them both a lot, you will notice the difference.
You might.
But I think that this is everything I need to feel like I'm experiencing Cab.
And this is what I want people to taste too when it comes to Cabernet, or this is what I'd rather enjoy rather than the expensive one. And honestly, I'm gonna say that that's not necessarily true. I think
what's not true,
that you'll be able to taste the difference between a $50 and a $200 bottle. I'm
trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but you know, I'm a skeptic.
I'm not saying that I've tasted Turnbull's, you know, $200 bottle or their single vineyard this or that, but what I do know is that a lot of times we talked about what oak costs. We talked about, you know, block B, whatever this block is my favorite. But when it comes down to it, sometimes in lineups, I'm thinking of, you know, very recently I tasted a Priorat producer that's very established. I'll regret from saying the name, but they've got, you know, some really great mid and entry level wines. They're just so delicious. And then they've got this crazy wine that's 2.5 times the price of their other wine. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's just, it's a Spanish Priorat. Like, I want to see what this is going to taste like. And it just
didn't do it for you.
It had none of it didn't feel like it was made by the same winery. Didn't feel like it was from this place. It tasted like it was trying to be something that was, and I'm not going to say that that's always what happens. And we have a saying in wine, smells expensive. Like, things do smell expensive because new oak costs something, a certain amount of concentration, or a certain amount of alcohol.
It smells a certain way. You can pick it up
on it. Yeah.
When you smell the Turnbull next to the Branham, you smell a difference. That's the oak.
That's the oak.
That's the oak.
And they're not.
And that oak is not cheap.
But it doesn't mean that this, if this were to be, whatever was 4 times the price, does that justify it? I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was the most people's favorite wine.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Of the trio.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah. It has nothing, and there's a bunch of games that marketers play and wineries play to make something,
exclusive,
feel exclusive, big, better. I mean, look at
scarce.
Yeah. Look at how much Dom Perignon costs, there's so much of that wine made that there's nothing scarce about it. It's a branding.
That'll get us into the whole small grower, estate grown champagnes, which we did last month. And if you're looking for champagne, still on the site, check it out. The grower producer champagne is pretty cool because it's not something that's mass produced, and there's no knock on Dom Perignon. Like that is.
I'll knock on it.
You'll knock on Dom Perignon
just because of the sheer price.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get it again, just like guy. I would think there was a time where I was like, Dom Perignon is the pinnacle of champagne.
Yeah.
And when you it's an excellent branding and marketing effort. And I always thought Dom Perignon was the tops of champagne. Yeah. And then this guy shows me champagne that's like a third of the price and is better.
Yeah.
And it took well, it's not like I had, a well of Dom Perignon at home waiting for me. But it didn't take long for me to realize and appreciate why these small grow producers were making great wine and what makes them stand out. And I think it's like cool, you're drinking the little guy a little bit. You're supporting the little guy in a way. You're not buying these like big houses and they're gonna make their money. Like you don't have to worry about Dom Perignon. No. And, you don't have to worry about Bra or Chiquet. You don't have to worry about those guys either. But they're established. But
you want to support the ones that you believe in. And Dom Perignon, don't get me wrong, like makes some of the most age-worthy champagnes, and they do have a formula that they're consistency. You want to talk about consistency from producer, vintage to vintage.
That in spades.
They have that in spades, right? They know how to create the product that they make, and that is, it speaks volumes when you can make something of that quality in volume,
year in, year out.
Right, and the same thing with Opus. Again, people have the same thing, but when it comes down to it, it's, I think they're both. I mean, obviously, they're both well-made wines. They're both super age-worthy, but when it comes to the price of it, and I see the transparency of the pricing, it's really unfortunate when something can be sold at Costco for retail for less than what I had to pay wholesale for it. Or in 2020, when a brand is hurting, like, no one knocked on my door like, none of my small producer favorites of champagne knocked on my door like, hey, actually, it's all going to be it's going to be about 62% of what it was before, right? Because their cost of their champagne is what it was. And then you have another big brand that is funneling all this marketing and funneling. They've got all this excess stock, and they want to have the right placement. And now all of a sudden you're discounting this product to this certain level, and it kind of, as a purchaser and a consumer myself, as a wine buyer, it betrays my trust a little bit. In all honesty, it kind of frustrates me, and the restaurants I've worked at, they don't call up in the slow month of January and say, oh, actually our tasting menu is only going to be this much.
We got a bunch of availability.
Yeah. No one,
that's the dream.
It's it costs,
that's the dream.
It costs what it costs. And that, to me, you're almost taking advantage of the consumer at a certain point when you're.
So why deal with all that? Why try to find the wines on your own? Sales pitch.
Yeah. You're such a salesman.
Such a salesman. We gotta sell wine. We're in business. We're here. I think we're doing the best we can. We got some good wines. We got wines with integrity, and I think that the best thing I can say about this is that if you don't like a bottle, we're gonna find out why.
Yeah.
You're gonna work with Roby. You're gonna talk to him for 5 minutes, and I guarantee you, he's gonna be able to pull out exactly what you didn't like about that wine. And he's gonna give you the words you need to avoid that kind of wine in the future, and he's gonna make sure you never get that from us again.
Yeah.
And that's powerful, because wine is fast. And you go to a restaurant, you go to a store, you'll find, you might think, oh, I love Cabernet, and you drink Cabernet, and then you have one and you're just like, that was awful. And what you need is Roby to tell you, oh, that was a really pyrazine heavy Cabernet. That had a lot of the green bell pepper note. And as soon as you have green bell pepper, you can go anywhere and say, I don't like pyrazines. I don't like green. I'll be like, cool. Don't order that. But you're going to want this cab.
Yeah.
And it there are a million little things like that just make you a savvy wine drinker, that you don't even realize how accessible it is.
When's the last time you talked to, what's your most recent experience with the sommelier where you were kind of talking about the list?
Well, I was actually, I don't think we didn't have a somm at this restaurant, but I was just at a bachelor party. And people knew about my wine business, and I was one of the last to arrive at the restaurant, and they hadn't ordered any wine. And they were like, we're waiting for Nick. And it was really cool, because there was a pretty big wine list. And it was a group that was, celebrating and willing to spend a little bit. And I got to pick out some cool wines, and I can't even imagine, a couple years ago, picking wines for 16 people at a bachelor party dinner. That was intense.
You didn't tell me about this.
That would have been intense. That would have been insane.
This is at Gar's.
This is at Gar's bachelor party. And we got a couple bottles of we got Donoff Rieslings.
Oh, cool.
We got a Christum Pinot. We got wines that
so you didn't even ask for help. You were just ordering off the list.
Yeah. I mean,
like, I was asking if you had an experience with something, but like, so now
I went to that restaurant and I just knew what to get.
Dang, that's pretty cool.
It was I knew what to get, and I talked to the, it wasn't a som, but the waiter was helpful and was like, okay, cool, and like knew how to get me what I wanted, and I knew what I wanted, which was great. I got wines that I thought fit the food, and they did, and I was really, really happy about it. And
it's a lot of pressure. 16 people.
16 people wanting wine, and I got it for them, and I don't think there were any complaints. And it was people who gave the classic, oh, I don't like Riesling, I don't like sweet wines.
And for those of you who don't know, Donoff is from the Nahe region in southern Germany, and classically they do make many dry GGs, and they do make a Trocken and stuff like that. I'm not sure what you had. Did you have something that was sweet, or
it was the entry level? No, it was the off dry.
Off dry, yeah.
Off dry.
Yeah. And people said they don't like Riesling, and then they had it.
Yeah. I mean, at least I would say that there was one person who was like, yeah, it was still a little too sweet for me.
Yeah.
Which, was fair. But a lot of people were like, oh, I don't usually like Riesling. I don't like sweet wines. I'm like, well, this isn't like a sweet wine. This is like an off dry.
Yeah.
It's balanced.
Zippy.
It all comes back to balance. It was acidic. It had enough acid to like match the little bit of residual sugar left in that wine that made it, I think, a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. The Fon Vinning white label, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, you said Donoff. Yeah.
But it was cool. And like a couple years ago, there's no way I would have ever done that. I think there was a time where I was out to dinner with people, a few years ago, and I like texted you under the table, and I was like, oh, I want to get this Beaujolais, but I don't know. And you're like, yeah, good. You gave me the green light. And we can do that too. You can reach out to us at any given time, and we'll help you find the right wine on the fly if we're available. And I think that it's like you take those training wheels off, and it's really empowering.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. I didn't even hear that story. We haven't been able to link up. If Nick and I are used to spending a lot of time together, but I've been gone for a month, and then he was gone last week. It's amazing that the website hasn't crashed and that we still sell wine to people.
Still shipping features.
Still shipping.
Oh yeah. By the way, if you're someone who's bought wine from us before, you should go and log in, and you'll see some stuff there, that you didn't see before, because we're launching the wine profiles, which is
and I'm a little frustrated because he doesn't want to tell people that it's launched.
Well, we can tell people here. Anybody who's here, I don't want to broadcast to the that's literally what we're doing right now. But I don't want to make it too loud. We got one person.
I think
so. This is
I think
still
it's
discreet in my opinion.
Well, I won't have an argument with you on camera, but I personally think it's valuable right now, even if it's not the end.
I get it.
Even if it's not what everything we wanted it to be, it is a huge tool. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people, how many times I sell people a bottle, and the first thing they do is pull out their phone for Vivino and take a picture, man. And it's not even about the fact that they're not trusting me on the rating or whatever it is. They want to log it.
So,
right?
So for anyone who ends up watching this doesn't know what we're talking about. One of the things that we really want to achieve with Somm Advanced is to give you like a home base of wine, to give you like a ledger of the things you've experienced, the wines you've tasted. And what we launched this last weekend was your wine profile. So when you log in, you'll see all of your wines that you've purchased from us in your profile, with information about those wines and a rating form where you can give us feedback. You can tell us what you thought of that wine, and we want to give you a really specific rubric, right? Because I think that what's frustrating about rating systems in general is that a 5-star to you might mean something very different. A lot of people are very, different with how they rate.
Well, everyone's
subjective, right? So we want to make this as objective as possible. And to do that, we don't talk about necessarily the qualities of the wine in the rating system, right? What you perceive as strawberry and I perceive as raspberry, that's immaterial. We both experienced red fruit.
Right.
Great. But that's not what made you love the wine, or that maybe it is what made you love the wine, but what's important is just that we know you love the wine, because we can figure out why you love that wine.
Right.
And so our system is much more about figuring out the wines you love and why you love them. And to us, like, it's a simple 4-star scale. And it's not about, whether you would choose this bottle over this bottle, but it's about incorporating how you felt about that bottle, considering the value of that bottle. And ultimately, if you gave a 4-star bottle, that to me means you want more of this wine, right? And if you don't want more of this wine,
I think of the 4-star.
Don't give it a 4-star.
I think of the 4-star is my wine cellar.
That's I want that in my cellar.
Right.
I want like case me.
So like
case me.
4-star,
right?
yeah. And well, people aren't quite ready for the case yet, but and that brings up to another point. But the 4-star wine is not the best wine you've ever had. Right. But it's the top on our scale.
It's not, doesn't have, a $15 wine could be a 4-star wine.
Yeah.
Because you just want that
every day.
You want that in your house. You want to open it for dinner with friends. You want to just have it on hand. When you want to be able to reach for a bottle that you love, that you know you're going to enjoy. That's a 4-star wine. Yeah. If you thought that wine was good, and I'm not like so wild about it that I need more, but it seems like I like this region. Let's keep exploring.
I drank it.
I drank it. I enjoyed it. Let's keep exploring.
That's a 3-star.
That's a 3-star, and we'll get you more from that region or that producer, and we'll help you really figure out what you might be enjoying about that wine, about that place, about that grape. And then 2 stars is like, I enjoyed it enough to finish it. I wasn't wild about it.
Finish that one too.
Let's go in a different direction. Yeah, you can finish a 2-star. Anyone can get through a 2-star wine. It's 1-star where we have a problem. And a 1-star wine is something you really probably couldn't even finish, right? You weren't interested in finishing it. Maybe you bought a couple bottles and you did one because you didn't like the first. But there's a good chance that bottle might have been flawed. But even if it wasn't flawed, then that's like actually, I think, the biggest learning opportunity of all is that we can give you oftentimes it's one word, it's one term, which is like, pyrazines or Brettanomyces, or one of these things that are pretty strong flavors that a lot of people love, but maybe you don't. Yeah. And if you don't like it, we can tell you exactly why you don't like it.
It doesn't have to be that complicated. It could be a little something as heavy.
Great.
It could be tannic.
No more cab.
It could be acidic.
Yeah.
A lot of people like, texture is such a big thing. It's not even necessarily a flavor. But we get there when we get there. The other thing that you're mentioning about, with the rating. The numbers, case me. This is, I remember when I was first buying wine for myself, and I would be afforded the opportunity to buy, there are certain wines that you'll see we'll have for a certain amount of time because we only get a certain amount of them. They're called allocations. And allocations don't mean that they're expensive. Allocations are simply
they're coveted.
Yeah, they're coveted. There's only a certain amount of them, and you get X amount, right? So when we get them and we sell them, they're gone, and unfortunately, we got to wait till the next year to get them. And so what I found out early on when I was learning about my wines is that I found out that I was regretting not having more of what I was first offered to buy. And it doesn't have to be an allocated necessarily. It was like I got a Pinot and I tried it, and I was like, wow, that's so good. And then I went back to the store to buy more, or I went back to Giampaolo and I was like, hey, can I get more of this Pinot? And they're like, oh, we don't have it, or it's gone, or we only have the 2021 vintage. Well, the 2020 was what it was. And back then I'm talking about 2013 or this or that. But what ended up happening was I was like, I stopped buying things one at a time. Because it's fleeting. Because it's fleeting. And I know that, okay, I'm buying a Burgundy or I'm buying a Nebbiolo from, this year. I know it's going to be good enough. But what I hate is when it's so damn good and I don't have another, and I only got one, and I got another bottle. And I'm not expecting people to go on the site and buy 6 of something. But I think what some demand and what I want to share with people is like, okay, you're going to spend X amount of dollars on wine. You're going to go to a store at the last minute looking for a bottle for a dinner party. I think
that this is the salient point right here.
It's like you're going to go to a dinner party. You're going to need a bottle of wine. And now you got to go drive out of your way
to go to
a store. To go to a store to pick up something that you may or may not be able to find. It's like, we want to show you like, okay, I like to spend this much on wine for parties. I like to spend this much on wine for my weekday bottle. And I like wines like this. What can you show me? And we want to show you an array of wines, and then you get to taste them. And when you find something you like, I encourage you to double down on it, because It may
It's
just
gone.
be, it may be, yeah, it's gone. It also just may be, you know, the Pinot Noir from this producer on this year, it speaks to you, you know, and the Grenache from the producer this year, you know, it speaks to you. And then you're like texting me like, hey, can I get a case of this? And I'm like, okay, I don't want to, no, but I don't want a case of it, but like you want a case of it. So let's get you a case of it. Right. You know, because it's a wine that speaks to you. So, you know, buy the stuff you like, because you never regret having another bottle of your delicious stuff. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't, I think that is the thing that I hope people can relate to, is that like it'll save you some time and stress and hassle if you just have that wine you love and you're going to someone's house and you want to bring a wine. Maybe it's one that like, it's not a crazy, you know, dinner. It's just something you want to bring something, you know, and that you can open and be proud of and be excited about. And why not have that wine on hand? It's not necessarily something that you have to have aging in your cellar forever, that you're going to open at your, you know, at a wedding. It's at a special, it's like not every wine that you want a case of is a special occasion wine, I think is what I'm trying to say. And
of course not. And the other thing is like, one, you know, a lot of the wines that you'll find from us are, you know, they're restaurant wines. They're restaurant quality wines. They're wines even sometimes we were able to buy because we work in restaurants. The two somms that, you know, that are involved with Somm Demand.
Not a somm.
Not a somm. Right. So we, you know, we get to buy things that wouldn't necessarily be in retail shelves, or we at least have something that, you know, we definitely don't want to be selling the same stuff that you see in every grocery store. So, you know, it's something nice when you come to a party, and not only do you get a bunch of information on the wine that you might be able to tell somebody about, but it's not something that someone else is going to bring to the party also. And then if you like it, it's all the more to it. So,
and then you can be like, well, here's where I got it.
No, you don't have to do that.
Just kidding.
No, people love wine.
I think people are excited to talk about wine, and when you know the story behind the bottle you brought, I think it's a conversation piece. It's fun. It's nice when you bring a bottle of wine over and people ask you about it and you want to talk about it. And I think that we sell those wines. Those, like, we sell wines that are worth learning about and are worth talking about.
Yeah. Even if they suck.
Yeah. Even if they suck.
You get to learn.
This was so bad, and let me tell you exactly why it was so bad. Do you like this wine? I have a case. Do you want it? Yeah. But
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks to our one viewer and anyone who may revisit this video in the future. But we're past time. We had so much fun with nobody, and
everybody.
We can't wait to do it with you again.
Yeah.
Again,
fantastic.
We tasted 3 cabs tonight, all from Napa Valley and
Cabernet.
Napa Cabernet. And I think that these are worth visiting. I think they're worth checking out. So check us out, sommdemand.com, and hopefully we'll see you in a tasting soon.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, you can taste from Mexico.
I'll taste from Mexico. I'm traveling.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.